While every, while everyone's getting settled, a couple housekeeping items. Please make sure your name on Zoom is your full name. You can do this by clicking on participants. There's a little arrow next to your name, and you can rename it there. I invite you to turn your cameras on for the session. This is meant to be interactive, so I'll be asking you to unmute and join the discussion throughout. It is easier to manage the flow if you type your questions into the chat, and Kat will be monitoring the chat so that we make sure that we get to everyone's questions and everyone has a chance to jump in the conversation. After the session, you'll receive an email with a link to a feedback survey. Your input is invaluable and helps us continually improve our educational content. So we really appreciate that you'll take the time to share your thoughts later today. Okay. For anyone who's just entering, again, I'm Stephanie Talabasa, the owner of House of Physical Therapy in New York City, and our guest expert today is Brent Bednar, the CEO of Lincoln Orthopedic Physical Therapy in Nebraska. Please turn your cameras on so that we can see you as we're speaking, and just stay on mute until we call you up for a question. Right now, can everyone jump into the chat and write the name of their practice and what size clinic you have or what stage of business you're in if you're solo right now? It's nice to know who we're talking to and just kind of go. I'm going to throw mine in here first. So House of PT has 2 locations in New York, and Lincoln Orthopedic Physical Therapy has 11 clinics in Nebraska. Perfect, thank you. All right, so we've got 6 locations, 2 clinics, 15 years experience. Awesome. Okay, so the topic in focus for January is strategic planning. So if you're a private practice member, you receive Impact Magazine, and you might have read Brent's article about internal sales titled, "Keeping the Band Together, How Minority Ownership Rocks the Future of Your Business." So Brent, I'd like to start off with your article and how to plan for an internal sale. Then we'll go broader with some questions that were submitted, and to really make sure everyone leaves with something tangible today, Kat's monitoring the chat and we'll be pulling people off mute as we go. So,
sounds good, Stephanie.
All right, give us a little overview. What does someone have to kind of start thinking about with an internal sale?
Yeah. This is this article comes from personal experience this past year. So we really sat down as a kind of a strategic planning meeting of our own as owners. And we said, like, how do we continue to grow as a company, create some buy-in within some people that are already in leadership positions within LOPT. And we kind of came down to, like, we wanted to kind of start thinking about the next generation of owners as we look at longevity for some of us as we get older, and like what's our plan, exit plan at some point. So that was kind of where this article came from, was just kind of the experience that I've had this past year. So, really it came down to for us the long-term plan for our company. What did we want to do? We really want to have the option for a legacy company. So that was our hope, is to continue to keep that door open, as all of you probably deal with private equity and different groups reaching out to you all the time. So we really wanted to keep that as an option. So that was part of where this came from. I think the first step to answer your question, Stephanie, is just, answer the why. Why do you are you considering that? And for us, that was kind of the answer to that question, was the longevity and all those different reasons.
I love it. So what are some things that you took into consideration to prepare for this before announcing it to the team or before really getting into any actual
That's a great question, Stephanie. Really, for one, we had 5 owners. And so, for us to be all on board with that, we all had to kind of have a unified decision on that. That wasn't going to be something we were going to talk one of us into. So that was a big deal for us, is we all had the unified decision on that. But then we also identified the people that we thought were going to be strategic people to add on the ownership. We didn't feel like there could be just kind of a shotgun approach of like, hey, we're just going to add multiple people. They really had to make us better, or they were already making us better. So we identified, three different people. We have regional managers, we have clinic directors, and we have regional managers over those clinic directors. So we identified our three regional managers who are already doing leadership. They're already kind of our rock stars within our company. And so we identified those three people and then moved forward with those three.
And, talking about how to choose people to bring into this next step, what are some things? So I know in the article you talked about considering, is this a move for retaining that employee, or are there other things that you are looking at on the back end? So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. Yeah, I think I've a lot of advice that I've been given and even experience with. We've had an owner who left our company that just wasn't a good fit. So we've kind of been through those different highs and lows of ownership with adding owners and not, whether it was a fit or not. So really, it came down to us is we didn't want to just add owners for retention purposes. It really had to be more for strategic purposes. So for us, it was people that were already doing leadership. They added an aspect to our leadership team already. So really, it was something that was made us better in a lot of ways. So that was the big tipping point for us. It wasn't just about getting people on the ownership for retention. And I think, and even for them to have a role too, like I almost, for me personally, like, okay, we identified these three people and it was about having them be, they're already in a leadership position within like a regional manager. But I also had kind of a vision of like, what's their next step after that regional manager? So it wasn't just that they're going to camp out at that regional manager position, but they also had something to move into. So I identified a guy that's, could be my replacement, whenever I decide to, move on at some point. So that was kind of a strategic move on my part, and also just to be able to mentor him, come alongside him. And there's just a different element that I can teach him doing side-by-side stuff now. So that's kind of helpful too.
So can everyone just make sure they're on mute? Thank you. So the thing that I wanted to bring up there is you talked about finding a missing piece on the leadership team. So when you're doing that self-reflection, are you pulling someone into that role because they satisfy an opposite skill set from you? Or when you said this is someone that you could mentor, do they have the same skill set?
Yes, on both of those, I would say, I would say just in general, my theology as far as leadership is creating opportunities for people, moving in people into leadership. The more I tried to delegate some of the different things that I do, especially if it's let's say KPIs. I used to do all of our KPI mentoring, and at some point I was like, this is just too much for me to handle, and so I need to offload this onto somebody. But I found the right person. It was like, wow, this guy is going to be better at it than I am, and so who can you identify that's going to be better than you at it? So being okay with giving the time to mentor that person, but ultimately identifying the person that like you think will be better at it than you are. So those were I've done that with some metric stuff, but the owners that we identified, one was about core values. He's going to be more on the HR side. He's going to continue to do some of the mentoring side. One gal is going to do more communication. She's going to move into some compliance. So that's kind of her track, is more on the compliance side, communication side. And then the guy that I identified kind of to be with me is more about growth and development, maybe some mentoring, all that stuff. So it kind of takes something that I do potentially, and then expands on what I do and makes it better. And then you can also like my time is geared towards mentoring those individuals so that they feel empowered, they feel tooled to go out there and do more, and then they have the time and honestly the more creativity than I do to bring more energy to that area. So I think, I mean, for you guys to even look at the areas that I think I talked about this in the article too, like what areas are you struggling with that you don't want to do that maybe is kind of a time suck for you? What's a barrier to your own growth as a leader within your company? So if you can identify those and then identify a person that can fill that role, it expands on what you can do and it frees you up a ton too.
Right. Talking about finding someone who could potentially do what you do, how soon ahead did you start thinking about your exit strategy? How early is too early?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, we are a company that started in 1982, and so our two founders, they identified us as owners. I've been an owner since probably 2012, I think. So I've been an owner for about 12 and a half, 13 years. So really, they identified us as owners about 12 years ago, and they just retired at the end of 2020. So that process for them started a long time ago. And then, I moved into this role over time. So I kind of took that roadmap and started to apply that to my transition. And that transition could be in, 12, 15 years, but that maturation process that happens as a leader, and especially for us, the size that we've grown into, I feel like it's going to continue to get more complex. So to be able to mentor my replacement over a good period of time and really have a solid foundation for him to be able to move forward is super important too.
One of my favorite analogies from the article, because, as a fellow Impact board member, I know that each theme is based on a different genre of music. So you really leaned into the musician theme. So you said great musicians don't focus on the next role. They glance ahead, understand signs, and anticipate transitions.
Hmm.
So I think that's a really just great analogy of keeping your eyes on what's to come and keeping that pulse. Did you play an instrument?
I was in probably middle school and early high school, but my passion kind of went towards sports, and so it transitioned out. But my mom forced me and my brothers to take piano lessons when we were in elementary school, and so there's a part of me that's very scarred by that. But I've moved forward and have that experience to at least rely on for articles once in a while. So
Yes, and it's helpful to really drive home that point.
yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add um, about the recruitment process?
Yeah, we did identify a couple others, honestly, that could have been potential owners, but part of our criteria was there was a financial aspect to this. So I think that's always a concern is, how are they going to pay for this? And so, that's a whole nother topic as far as how we set that up. And, for us personally, we didn't want to finance that personally, and especially this potentially, if I would, let's say I walk away in 5 years, I'm okay with financing that to these new owners because it might be a better option for them. But we really wanted a financial institution to vet their financial stability. That was pretty important for us too. So we did have them get financing through a bank for these initial shares. So we've just felt like that was important. We didn't want to be partnered with someone with like poor financial management. There was different things that you can do on your own as far as credit scores but we felt like if we just had the bank do it for us, ultimately the bank is using us to back those loans in many ways. So we just have a good relationship with the bank that we could do that with them. But we felt like that was kind of an important aspect of this whole ownership discussion, as opposed to, like, oh, this is the, strategy, but there's also a reality to that of paying those loans back. And so we felt like we really wanted to take that on a pretty serious note as well. So we did have a couple, honestly, that, they would have been great owners, and great leadership positions that they are right now, but they felt like it just wasn't the financial decision for them and their family. So we felt like that was kind of a good criteria. Like, hey, if that's, we want to continue to grow. We want to continue to invest some of our cash flow into growth each year. So if they weren't able to come alongside that strategy, we felt like that would be a hindrance to our own growth within the company. So it was just a good way to essentially weed out some of the owners that weren't a part of the overall strategy that we're trying to accomplish too.
Right. So something objective and concrete. James asked, do you have different levels or classes of ownership? And James, do you want to pop on and jump in the conversation? If not, I'll read the whole thing.
I can, yeah, I'll just give a brief description. We have 2 minority owners as of last summer. I have 2 director position employees who bought into the company. But we've been discussing, it'd be nice maybe to have something available to all employees. So even if they weren't on a decision-making owner track, so to speak, you could have even a front desk person buy some shares, keep those, and then if they retire 10, 20 years down the road, they get growth on that investment, for just being a part of the company, helping it grow. Just starting to look at that. So I'm not sure. I was wondering if you guys have that or have heard of that or have any thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at Class A shares, Class B shares, shadow stock, ESOP, all those different options. We just felt like this was simpler. This is more consistent with what we've done in the past. And we've looked at non-provider ownership, but just overall strategy, this is kind of where we wanted to just keep it within the providers. So, and we've had people ask about that same thing, James, like as far as, hey, can I become an owner by minority shares? But I don't know. We felt like this was the right option for us. We did look at Class B shares a couple of years ago as a potential option. Some of the people's feedback, honestly, like that just really had no interest in that. Like they wanted to be a part, they wanted to have ownership in the company as opposed to just shadow stock and like basically get a dividend that would really didn't have value in the company. They wanted to, like what you're saying, have value in the company for that value to grow over time. So yeah.
Stephanie, you're on mute.
Anyone else want to jump in right now with a question before I go into some of the ones that were submitted ahead of time that are more broad?
I think Nisha had a question about developing staff potential. Nisha, did you want to jump in and ask your question, or did you want me to read it in?
No, I can jump in. So if you don't, I see that you identified a lot of these people from existing leadership positions. If you don't have anybody necessarily in those leadership positions now, but you've identified some potential and maybe some junior, less seasoned folks, and time is obviously the issue, right? And finding time to mentor them and bring them up, and they need to be involved in patient care to generate revenue. How do you sort of go about finding the time to develop that mentorship into more of the leadership side of things?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nisha. That has been kind of my my passion over probably the past 4 years is to identify some of those people. So probably it was probably 4 years ago, we started doing a clinic director program. At that point, I think we had 7 clinics at that point. And so, we started saying like, well, we're getting spread too thin as far as the ownership group. How are we going to identify, how are we going to continue to manage these clinics better? So we did clinic directors. The next year we did more of a a mentorship program, and I identified 3 different people for that. So they took 3 different things off my plate, and they were super dynamic. And it was kind of based on 3 different areas, whether it was patient engagement, team engagement, and like a healthy KPIs or business. It's kind of like the 3-legged stool that that you and I probably have used in the past. But so I identified somebody to mentor each one of those different areas. And so they have all kind of grown into these roles as well. And then this last year, we identified regional managers. So, and then we handpicked some of our most effective clinic directors and then put those into regional managers. So you're right, identifying them and then the time that it takes to pour into them and then allow them to develop and also allow them to, to fail and see if they're going to be good at this, as opposed to just, it kind of gave a trial and error for those people as well. And so, thankfully we identified those people. And then I spent personally a lot of time developing those people. So, I'm out of patient care 100%. So my job is, to develop people and develop the company. So my time was devoted to developing those people. So that took, 2 or 3 years to get them to that point. And then the next step was that ownership piece. So you're right, Nisha, like identifying them and then being willing to put the time and patience into developing people. And maybe we miss once in a while and have to circle back and find somebody else. But luckily we found good people and they've been successful. Hopefully that answers your question, Nisha.
Jody asked, after the initial buy-in, do you have other ways that they can gain shares? And Jody, feel free to unmute and come up.
Yeah, I'm looking at the kind of a similar model. I just have one clinic and I've been out of patient care for about 8 years. So I have 4 therapists and I've identified 2 of them that I would like to buy the clinic over time. And I do want there to be an initial upfront investment, kind of like what Brent is talking about with loans or kind of vetting their financial situation. But I've already had conversations with each of them, and one of them said, as we buy in more, could we sort of like reinvest the dividends of whatever profits we would be getting in order to purchase more into the business, as opposed to continuing to take out loans and buying into the business more. So I was just curious if you had different alternative ways after that initial buy-in for them to continue to buy more of the business.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jody, like we've kind of said, the shares will be available when they're available. There's one guy that is in our company that's he's about 55. And so he's kind of said, hey, I would like to be done in like this many years. And so he's kind of identified his time frame and his like what he would like. So he's kind of said, over time, I'd like to sell some of those shares. The rest of us are still in our 40s. And so we feel like, okay, I'm not really willing to sell my shares at this point, because I feel like I'm still in the hunt of all that. But I would say that we've just told them shares can be purchased when they're available. Like, I think we're not gonna reinvest them. And for them personally, like the dividends that they get are going back to pay their loans at this point too. So we've set it up for, the value of the company, and we identified, hey, this is an internal multiplier that we feel comfortable with giving them an internal discount versus like what we could get on an external sale. So we did finance that, and we did the math essentially backwards. It's like, hey, on an annual basis, we kind of know what generally we've been able to distribute within our company, especially as at this point over the past couple of years. So those loans did have an amortization schedule. We felt good that we can help them pay back their loans, but it's not going to be super lucrative on their dividends either. So they're not going to have, thousands and thousands of dollars at the end of the year to have as profit. They're, unless we continue to grow. So if we grow, their dividends will be bigger. But like you said, if we just didn't give them the option to buy more shares with what that would look like for us. So.
So I think this is a good time to ask one of the pre-submitted questions. How early do you start talking to your team about this? And how do you explain some of these things, right, that we're talking about now? Especially if we don't know there's, changing components in healthcare, if we don't know the next 5 years, how are you explaining that, and how are you giving them that trajectory of what to expect?
Yeah, that gets to be tricky, right? So if you give too much information or make empty promises, people will get really frustrated with that. So we were really careful about not making promises to anyone. Like we really said, people asked about it, they're like, well, it's something we will consider. We just left it very, very open-ended. We made no promises on that. So once we did, it was probably November of 23, we said, okay, we're gonna move forward with this, and let's really dial in, like put a plan together basically on this. It took us probably 4 months to put that plan in place, get all the communication, understand like how we were going to present this opportunity to them. So it probably wasn't until late. It was probably maybe like 3.5 months. It was probably sometime in February. We identified these people and we said, hey, we're looking at this. This is a general picture. We're going to have you buy shares, and this is what it would look like. But that was about information, like the limit of information that we gave them initially. Like, are you interested? If you are, then here's the next steps. One of that next steps was we did have and had them sign an NDA. So anything that we shared, non-disclosure agreement, like we had them sign an NDA because we felt like if they were going to come to that meeting where we shared, like, here's basically everything about LOPT. Here's the financial. This is why this makes sense on a financial standpoint. Here's where we were at 5 years ago. Here's our trajectory for the next 5 years. So we felt like and all of that financial information was pretty sensitive. So we weren't just going to invite, anybody that was just like interested in the financial stability of our company. So it really came down to, I think there was probably 5 people that came to that meeting, and then 3 moved forward. So really, it was those 5 that we identified, and then 2 of them signed the NDA. And to their credit, it really hasn't changed. Now that they've seen everything, it really hasn't changed their work ethic, their attitudes, or anything like that. That was kind of a concern that we had. If we show people, are they going to say, oh man, this is where the company's at? Why am I, but
Yeah.
It was a way for them to be identified, but also like protect ourselves too.
Right, and that was part of the question was, once we show the plan, does it create a little bit of uncertainty? Does it create some questioning? And it's good to hear that it didn't change.
Yeah, and I think, and the people we identified they're good people, and like, again, we didn't just invite everybody to be owners, and so we felt like these were people that we wanted to be in partnership with in the first place. But yeah, that was a little bit of a hesitation on our part, honestly. It's like, okay, if you show them, how is this going to change? Or, if they essentially don't want you, or if they're like, man, if they're bitter towards what they get, or I don't know, all the little imaginations you can have, but it worked out fine for us. But I think, just communicating the right amount, like, and you guys have to decide that too, like the initial part, how much do you communicate that you feel like you gain some traction with interest from them, but not giving them so much information that that it either scares them off, or they feel like maybe they'll use that against you at some point. But for us, it worked out. But then, we after we'd had our meeting, signed the NDA, we had our meeting as far as like, hey, here's what these shares are going to be valued at. Here's where what this will look like, kind of some of the logistics. And then we gave them probably about it was probably 6 months to really work through, hey, their own financial part of it. They had to go to the bank. They had to put together their own financial statement, give that to the bank. But then all the work started happening on my end too, like to say like, okay, you know, we started using Paul Welk. We went through him to do all of our documents. We had previous documents, but we need them to be updated. And so I started working with him, and that took a lot of time as well. So to work through, you know, the documents to get everything with updating a few things with our own internal documents, but then also the buy-sell agreements too. It just took a long time, honestly. I mean, you think it's not something you can do in 3 months. It's, for us, it was like, it's communication. That was a big part of it. But then the back end side of like getting it valued and having a value that you feel is just for your company. You know, some of the partners that we were pursuing, they also had people that they were going to for advice, and they were saying like, well, why would you get a multiple of this when normal multiples for businesses are around, you know, let's say a 3 or 4? Like, well, our multiple is higher because we have 11 clinics. So, you know, like, well, physical therapy is a different value within healthcare versus, hey, if you just went and sold your uncle's, you know, used car company or something. So that's where it really helped having another expert come in and say like, hey, here's what the value is. Having someone within the physical therapy world that does mergers and acquisitions so that you know that the value is accurate and it's for them, but it's also for you too, to show that value. And so that was probably a little bit of the discrepancy from people that were interested, like, why is the value, like, how did you guys arrive at the value? And so that was an important step to know, okay, is the value correct? As opposed to just like, hey, we're just pulling that value out somewhere, like what you think it should be. It was based on objective value of like, hey, here's our net ordinary income, here's our adjusted EBITDA. It was based on that. It was based on a multiple that we decided. So all of the logistics that happened on that, it just took some time and effort, but we felt like because we had documentation that was important for the loans from the bank as well. So the bank needed justification for that price. And so that's where having help with the value and coming up with that help justify the loans to the bank too. So that's an important step too. So these are a lot of logistics, but it's stuff to think about, and it's kind of the hard work on the backside, but having experts help you with this stuff as opposed to doing it on your own, or someone that's not within the physical therapy world, they could potentially, you're not going to get the value that you probably deserve as an owner too, if you just have somebody that's outside the PT practice.
I think this is a good point to take a few steps back to what does it actually look like to create a strategic plan? If someone who's been in business for, I think the question came from someone 15 years in, has never thought about this, where do you start? What does a template look like?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, for us, you know, we've, our strategic plan happened probably 5 years ago. We said, what's our overall trajectory of what we want to accomplish over the next 5 years? So part of that strategy was a revenue goal, like, and a visit goal. So what did we want to get to as far as like a revenue goal for us? What did that look like? How were we going to get there? It wasn't just pulled out of, but maybe a little bit of like, hey, this is where we want to get to. Now, how are we going to get there? And so part of that was identifying a 5-year plan, and then how are we going to get there? And so then that looked like adding clinics. It looked like adding providers, lines of service, all of those different things to get to that revenue. So we really worked ourselves backwards to say, how are we going to get to that revenue goal? And then, you know, after this probably, that 5-year plan came, but we'd already accomplished that 5 years. So we really said, okay, what's our next 5-year plan. So part of our next 5-year plan was another revenue goal, but it also came down to like, what does our internal goals look like? And some of that was leadership development. We looked at retention. We looked at if we're going to hire all of these therapists to get to that revenue goal, how are we going to recruit and retain? So that was another part of our strategy. So we felt like coming up with action plans on all of those different things of retention, recruitment, growth. We had to identify all those different areas. So that's more of a broad 5-year strategy, but that helped guide our annual strategic planning too. Like what are we going to do this year to move that needle forward on that 5-year plan? So each year it was agreed upon, here's how much money we are going to invest into growth of our company. So part of that was like, hey, if we're going to add a clinic this year, how much money is that going to cost? How much money are we going to put into a de novo? That was part of the growth plan. And then also looking at staffing too. If we need to grow this for our this next year, how many therapists are we going to have to hire for this next year? So that was the recruitment part. And then it came down to all the other like HR and even some of the internal ops stuff as far as rev per visit, how we're going to rev per visit, how are we going to be efficient, what's our labor percentage, all those different things came down to the strategic planning too. But it always worked towards our 5-year plan and the annual goals that needed to happen to make that 5-year plan accomplished.
So really going to the end of the 5 years, working backwards, and then chunking that down into 1-year tangibles.
Correct. Yep. And I feel like and then once you've done it a couple of times, it just becomes that much easier because, especially with us, we have 5 owners and now we have 8, but if we had unity with the 5 of us that we're going to move forward, it just made it that much easier to move forward. If you're a single owner, then that's where, it's nice to have someone like if you're in a peer-to-peer program within the PPS, or if like you have another group of people that help you kind of push back on your strategic plan, that it definitely helps identify those so that you're not the smartest person in the room that way when you're sitting in your office alone. So
Right. I definitely think that's some of where this question comes from. If you're alone, right, how do you know how to break this down and hold yourself accountable?
Yeah.
Did
I
anyone?
think that's where the private practice section is so nice. Like you do have tons of resources within this community of just reaching out to people that have done it before and are doing it currently. I think that's super helpful. So
yeah. I'm going to come back to the chat for a second. So I think you answered the question about how you came up with your internal multiple. Will it change annually or is it fixed?
it will probably stay fixed for the next 5 years, but there's potential that it could change. Depends on the value of the company. If our value continues to grow, then it could be adjusted. But
now for newer owners who are getting these emails about someone being interested in purchasing their practice, I had a question of what components are actually sellable. So are they looking at their patient list, the team, the equipment and space, the brand name, kind of wanting to understand what they're looking at before even jumping into the conversation?
Yeah. They do look at, it's pretty multifaceted. It comes really down to like, if you want to know what they're going to purchase, they're going to really purchase your value. Like how much revenue do you have? What's profitability? Your adjusted EBITDA is a big part of what they're going to value that. So that's your net ordinary income, depreciation, taxes, amortization, all that stuff gets added into on top of your NOI. And so that's really what it comes down to as far as the value, what they're going to do. And then that's market standards as far as what multiple they're going to put on that EBITDA, that really comes down to market. And so that's where you probably need someone to help you out with that a little bit, so that it's not just them shooting you numbers. But it does come down to, that's the number part of it, but they also look at the other part. You know, they look at, do you have a good leadership program, development program? Do you have leaders that are leading? Is it just, one person? If there's a sole owner and they want to leave and exit, then the value of that company is less, because they really don't have anybody that is going to continue to carry that torch of leadership within that company. So that would probably be graded down because of the just the lack of leadership if that sole owner does leave. The other part is, like you said, name recognition, your consistent growth. So if you're in a declining growth pattern, the value of that company is going to be less. If you're in a growth pattern that's like consistent, you're going in a great direction, it's going to be much more attractive. So you're going to get more money out of that sales, versus if you're just going to, just if you're on your last leg and you're going to try to sell, it's probably not the greatest time to exit at that point. But
Are there any other major differences that you would highlight as far as how you're setting up the business to make it valuable to an external sale versus an internal sale? Are there specific things?
yeah, I mean, if you were going to do an external sale, I think, you work on your metrics and you get your value up as much as you can, your profitability up as much as you can. And that's really how you're going to get the highest value. For us, the internal sale, we wanted them to have more opportunities. And so that's really the kind of more the bend that we went to, is like, we want our internal stability to be really strong. And so having these additional owners allows us to be really strong on a growth pattern, but also our leadership team becomes that much stronger. So for us, it just makes us better on an internal standpoint. So it probably does make us look better from an external sale. Like if we would say like, hey, we're going to go to market, it probably does make us look better, but that's really not our motivation. It was really more about, hey, we want to develop our own team and make this a stronger company internally.
So it's really what your end goal and the motivation behind selling.
Yeah. Yeah. It honestly, if we were to do an external sale, it makes no sense for us to sell shares at this point. It would make more sense for us to, like, if you're going to sell in the next couple of years, really, it'd be better for you just to keep those shares to yourself and, clean up everything you can on your compliance, everything you can on your marketing and growth patterns, your metrics. If you have all of those really solid, you're going to be much more marketable. And all that value is yours, as opposed to us giving shares, away to people. It's probably not you don't really want to do that either, unless you want to say, hey, we want to bring some people with us. That's fine too. But for us, it was not about that.
I'm going to open it up to the group. Does anyone have anything else that they want to come up and ask? Any topics that we didn't cover? Okay. Well, Brent, those were all the questions that were submitted. I think, I gotta give people a chance to type.
Mm.
All right. Do you have a partnership agreement?
We do. Yep. It's all laid out and what that would look like. We have partnership agreement. We have scenarios. If this happens, this is what that would look like. If there's integrity issues or anything that happens, what their shares would be valued at. And that's where having Paul Welk help us out with all that stuff. I mean, he was invaluable, and he's like, okay, here's what I would recommend. Here's what we kind of typically do. So yeah, he was super helpful and all that stuff. And we had that kind of in our previous buy-sell agreements and all the partnership agreements, but having him update a few things and protect ourselves. And when we were presenting these to the new partners, we said, this really protects them, protects us, protects us from each other, protects us from different scenarios, but it lays out the expectations. So I know of a company here in town that they did have a minority owner. They gave him the shares, and then the day after he paid for his shares, he wanted out. And so, and they're still in litigation as far as how those shares are going to be paid for and what they're trying to do on those. So it's been a huge headache for them, but some of the details that they had laid out were not very well thought out. And so I felt like ours are much more black and white as far as somebody leaves, this is what you get paid. If this scenario happens, this is how much it's going to be. And there is no gray area in a lot of different aspects. So that's where I think Paul's an invaluable resource for us at private practice.
Wonder if I could ask a question, Brent?
Yeah,
What type of corporation are you?
yeah. We're an S corp. Yep.
We we're a C corp. We're one of the old dogs, and so that presents some problems of its own. And we've looked at changing, and it's pretty complex. And there's benefits to S versus C, and we've kind of stuck with the C. But it creates the problem of you can't carry over. You got to pay out your profit, or you can't save really within the corporation, or you pay the tax on it.
Yeah.
But I did have a question about the method you use to have your newer partners finance their purchases. We're a group practice. We have 22 partners, and we have done a lot of well, we've learned from the School of Hard Knocks a few times. A lot of the young therapists with their student loans and just the current financial climate, it's a hard thing for them to go to a bank and procure a loan. So it sounded like you use the bank that you guys use as your personal bank, or your corporation or your company's bank, and they give you some good grace because you guys are in essence the backing of those loans.
Correct. Right. And it was kind of a little bit of eye-opening I think for a couple of them, that I think they were thinking in the back of their head, well, why wouldn't I just go buy or just start my own clinic? If I'm going to pay for shares, why don't I just go use this money to do something on my own? But then when they found out, boy, the bank won't loan me this money to essentially unless the company backs me. So they were kind of,
Right.
and not that they had poor financial history or anything like that, but they just found oh, I'm getting this loan because ultimately the bank believes in LOPT more than they believe in that individual. So if they were to go on their own, the bank would not give them, the money to start a new clinic based on what the value was of what they were gonna loan versus what they would even have to take out to start a new business, right? So, but that's where we felt like having the bank do that vetting process, it definitely created some gratitude a little bit for what we were trying to do. Okay, hey, these guys are trying to help us out. It made the whole process a lot easier for us.
Yeah, that's good. We sort of a mistake. It worked for us for a while because we were probably misusing our line of credit as seed money to pay half of and then they would just pay they would, in essence, the selling shareholder would be the bank for half of the loan, and the line of credit was the other half, and they would pay back the line of credit at a great deal, just essentially what our rate was for paying it back. So there was no up cost, but the bank didn't really like the fact that we were using that line of credit, which is more for short-term cash flow issues and that sort of thing. So,
yeah,
but it worked.
Jody, do you want to just pop in and ask your partnership agreement questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so I'm trying to figure out the next step because I'm ready to, I know it's probably going to take me honestly a full year just because it's just me.
Mhm.
Trying to get the next step for getting the partnership agreement, the valuation. I've had conversations with both of them and I did not have them sign an NDA agreement. We didn't talk about any specifics, any money. It was just more vision. Is there alignment kind of thing? I told them the next step would be to sign an NDA for sure. But then I've used Martin Healthcare Advising for just some valuation and just to kind of get our own metrics better, which has been super helpful. And I know I could use them out again for this.
Mhm.
But I also was thinking long term, is it better to just get like a healthcare accountant to sort of look at those numbers, or do they not have the multiples for the industry?
Yeah, that'd be a good question. Like, with Martin, and like we used 8150 advisors, and so Steve Stalzer helped us out with our value. So that he's kind of on that same realm as Martin. So I think having someone that knows the M&A side really well, I think that's to your advantage. And that's my biased opinion, honestly. But um I would just be careful about reaching out of someone that doesn't know the PT market, because a lot of PT acquisitions are not publicized. So there's really no like public numbers to compare. You just have to have somebody that knows the market well enough of what a typical value is. So that's why having, you know, whoever you choose to do that I think is pretty important.
And do you think that's the logical next step before even going down the partner, like in all the legal stuff that has to happen?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, having a knowledge of what your value is, and then but also like what do you want to get out of it too? I mean, I think that's you have to be comfortable with how much of a discount do you want to give. So, I mean, you could get top dollar and just go to a private equity and probably sell and get the money that you wanted. But for us, like, hey, we want to kind of pass this on to the next generation. How do we do that well and set them up for success? Kind of like we were set up for success by the two founders. So passing that forward. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of working the math backwards on that too. How much do you want to walk away with? That's kind of an important question for you. But you're right. Like if you this is how much what I want, but I think yes, the next step would be to know what is your value, like on a market standpoint, and then how much of that do you really want to take? So I definitely think that's the next step, because yeah, um, doing the attorney fees is and all the logistics of that is probably the step after that, or after you have people that are that are going to be interested in it. But
Okay.
that's further down the
Yeah.
line.
And then do you have an accountant who sort of keeps all of the shares figured out, or do you use 8150 advisors for that as well when you're kind of doing distributions and stuff?
No, we don't really use them for all that, but just yeah, we do all of our billing in-house, so we just we do that internally, but we do have a CPA that kind of keeps track of everything, and yeah, he does all the numbers, works on our K1s at the end of the year, and then does our distributions and all the logistics of that. But yeah, our CPA does most of that.
Okay, and is it a healthcare specific CPA or just a general CPA?
It's general CPA.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, nope, that's good. Oh.
Anyone else? There's no more questions in the chat. So if there's anyone who wants to jump in. Well, thank you, Brent. This was really great. I really loved your article, and it was so nice to hear the story behind the article and really get some context of why you chose this direction. I really appreciate you being our first guest. Thank you everyone for participating, and the The survey will come by email afterwards. It's only going to be 3 questions. So if you could just pop in anything that would make these sessions more helpful for you. And if you have any questions, Kat will put the email in the chat. It's info@ppsapta.org. And this is going to be a monthly series. So we are going to have a guest expert that matches the topic in focus each month. So next month is HR. That will be on February 27th, also at 1 p.m. Eastern, so same time. From then forward, it will be the 4th Thursday of the month. And I really hope that you will spend your lunch hour with us each month. Thank you, Jody.
Stephanie, and thank you, Brett.
Thanks, everybody.